As you can see from the Q3 projections, our growth metrics have surpassed expectations across the board.
I used to think internships were just resume, padding, boring, predictable stepping stones into the corporate world. The summer before my senior year proved me wrong in a way I can't ever forget. The building where I worked was a 20-story concrete block downtown, its windows tinted so dark they looked black from the street. The elevators creaked, the air always smelled like burnt dust, and every hallway felt colder than it should have been, like the A divided by C was trying to keep something preserved. I was placed in the records and compliance department on the 11th floor, a quiet corner where the buzzing of fluorescents was the loudest sound most days. The employees were mostly older folks, tired, checked out, people who stared at spreadsheets like they were staring into their own graves. I was the youngest by at least 15 years. And then there was Nathan. He sat in the cubicle 2 rows behind me, mid-40s maybe, with a soft round face and glasses thick enough to distort his eyes. He never talked during meetings and never joined anyone for lunch. If someone greeted him, he'd give a stiff nod and immediately look back at whatever he was typing. He was just there, quiet, forgettable. I wish he had stayed that way. My first interaction with him was during my second week. I was struggling with an ancient database program the company refused to retire. It crashed every time I tried to run a query, and after the 5th crash, I muttered something under my breath and slapped the enter key harder than I meant to. A voice floated over the cubicle wall. "You need to sort before you filter. The software can't handle reversed operations." I stood up and saw Nathan staring directly at me, not over his monitors, not around the divider, but straight at me, as if he'd been waiting for me to make a mistake. "Oh, thanks," I said awkwardly. "Nobody explained that." "They never do," he replied monotone. "But I notice things. I can help." I smiled politely, sat back down, and forgot about it. Until the next day, when another helpful tip came, and the next, and the next. He'd appear the second I hesitated or frowned at my screen. It was like he was studying me, mapping out my patterns. At first, I appreciated it. My supervisor was too busy sipping iced coffee and gossiping on Zoom to help with actual work, so Nathan filling that void seemed harmless. But then the coffee started. One morning, I walked in to find a cup from the cafe across the street sitting neatly on my keyboard. My name was written on the lid. "Oh wow," I said. "Thanks, but how did you know I like caramel lattes?" "You had one on Monday," he said without turning around. "Starbucks. Extra caramel." I froze. I had gotten one on Monday, but I hadn't brought the cup inside. I'd finished it in my car before even entering the building. I brushed it off, assuming maybe he'd passed me in the parking lot or seen the empty cup when I tossed it. Coincidences happen, harmless coincidences, but they kept happening. Every time I absent-mindedly mentioned something out loud, a band I liked, a place I wanted to visit, a food I was craving the next day, something related would appear on my desk, a playlist link, a brochure, a wrapped snack. He wasn't just listening, he was cataloging. I told a friend outside of work about it. She laughed and said he was probably just lonely. An older guy trying to be nice. I wish that had been the truth. Mid-July, I took a Friday off for a quick trip to my aunt's cabin about 4 hours north. A place so quiet and rural that satellite signals barely worked and nobody except family even knew its name. When I came back Monday morning, a small cardboard package sat on my chair. I opened it, assuming it was office supplies. It wasn't. It was a miniature wooden carving of my aunt's cabin, down to the chipped corner of the porch and the blue kayak leaning against the railing. Details no one could possibly know unless they'd been there. I felt cold all over. "Do you like it?" Nathan's voice said from behind me. I jumped so hard the box fell from my hands. He was standing inches away. No footsteps, no warning, just there. How did you told me you were going to a cabin." I wanted to make something personal. Personal. The word sounded wrong coming out of his mouth. "I never described it," I said quietly. He smiled, not wide, not friendly, just a thin stretch of lips that didn't match the deadness in his eyes. "I'm observant," he said. "I pay attention. People don't appreciate that anymore." He walked away before I could say anything else. I spent the rest of the day trying to rationalize it. Maybe my mom posted a photo somewhere. Maybe someone in the family mentioned it online. Maybe, but no, that cabin never appeared online, not once. My family barely uses social media. That night, I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Nathan sitting in his car outside the cabin, carving the wood while watching the lights inside. 2 days later, everything escalated. I stayed late finishing a report. The entire floor was empty except for me. I was packing my things when I noticed a faint glow coming from Nathan's cubicle. He was sitting there, but he wasn't working. He was watching something. Curiosity mixed with dread pushed me closer. I peeked around the cubicle wall. His monitors showed a 4-screen grid of live camera feeds around the office hallways, stairwells, a break room, and then the 4th feed. The 4th feed made my stomach drop. It was a camera pointed upward from beneath a desk. My desk. I stared at the screen, frozen. On it, I could see my own legs, my sneakers tapping anxiously on the carpet. I didn't even hear him stand up. "I was hoping you wouldn't stay late tonight," he said from behind me. I turned around slowly. He was smiling again, wider this time. "Now you've seen it," he whispered. "Now you understand." I felt the world close in around me. My pulse hammered in my ears. I took a step back. He stepped forward. "You don't have to be scared," he said softly. "I only watched to protect you." I bolted. I don't remember deciding to run, I just did. I tore down the hallway, heart pounding, legs shaking, hearing him behind me, his footsteps heavier and faster than I expected. I slammed into the stairwell door and sprinted down the steps 2 at a time. He followed. His breathing echoed off the concrete walls. "Stop running," he yelled. "You're overreacting." I just kept running. I didn't stop until I hit the lobby and practically collapsed at the security desk. And that was when things got even worse. I collapsed against the edge of the security desk, gasping out words that barely formed coherent sentences. The night guard, an older man named Warren, rose from his chair with a start, dropping his crossword book. "Kid, you okay? What happened?" I pointed at the stairwell door, barely able to get air into my lungs. He's chasing me. Nathan, he put cameras under my desk. He's watching me." Before Warren could respond, the stairwell door groaned open. My blood turned to ice. Nathan stepped out, his breathing heavy but controlled, his glasses crooked, his shirt damp with sweat. But his face was perfectly calm. "Evening, Warren," he said smoothly, like nothing unusual had just happened. "Sorry about the commotion. The intern had a panic attack." I tried to help him. He said it with the tone of a teacher explaining a misunderstanding, as if I was the one acting irrational. His eyes were locked on me with a cold, unblinking intensity, the same look a predator gives when someone tries to take away its meal. Warren glanced between us, confusion mixed with concern. "Nathan, is this true?" he asked. I stepped in front of him. "No, he's lying. Check the cameras under my cubicle. He's been watching me. He followed me on my trip. He carved a model of the cabin. Nathan flinched, just slightly. The mask cracked for half a second. Warren saw it. "All right," the guard said slowly, picking up the phone. "Nobody move. I'm calling the police." Nathan didn't try to stop him. He just looked at me, not angry, not scared, just hurt, like I was betraying him. "I wasn't finished helping you," he whispered. Then he turned and walked out the revolving doors into the night. Calm, silent, almost graceful. He disappeared into the dark before Warren could even say a word to stop him. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers took my statement as I tried not to shake out of my skin. They escorted me upstairs, and when we reached the cubicle aisle where Nathan sat, the sight of his monitors made their expressions tighten instantly because the cameras were still open, and the feed under my desk was still live. But that wasn't the worst part. On his second monitor was a directory labeled Profile Intern 07, Behavioral Logs, Stress Data, Home Notes, a folder with my name on it. Inside were dozens of files, typed logs with timestamps, notes on how often I shifted in my chair, how fast I typed when stressed, what songs I listened to on lunch break, how many times I adjusted my glasses per hour. It wasn't human devotion. It wasn't friendship. It was obsession disguised as study. One of the officers murmured, "Jesus Christ." They found more cameras in other places, break rooms, storage rooms, even a vent directed toward the hallway. And tucked inside a locked drawer in his desk were printouts of photos. Photos of me walking from my car. Photos of me at the grocery store. Photos taken through my apartment window, through the blinds. The officers didn't let me see the rest. They said I didn't need to. The next morning, they went to his apartment with a warrant. He was gone. Not just gone, he had emptied the place. Cleared out the drawers, wiped the machines, left nothing behind but dust outlines, where furniture. One Saturday, a neighbor said he'd left at 5 a.m. carrying 2 duffel bags and never came back. They searched for months, but Nathan wasn't a normal guy. He had no active social media, no fingerprints on record, and barely any official documentation. The company HR files had his name spelled 2 different ways. His emergency contact information led nowhere. His background checks came up incomplete. It was like he had existed only in the shadows between data points. Like he had built himself to be untraceable. The company offered to move me to a safer department once the dust settled, but I left the internship the next day. I couldn't walk into that building again. Couldn't hear the hum of overhead lights without imagining his footsteps behind me. I moved out of my apartment within a week. I bought blackout curtains and taped my laptop webcam the second I set up my new desk. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and check every closet, every cabinet, every window latch. No matter how many times I checked, sleep never came easy. Months later, I transferred schools just to get away from the city entirely. Life went on, in a way, but the anxiety stayed. I didn't tell many people about what happened, mostly out of embarrassment. Being watched sounded like paranoia until it wasn't. Then, almost a year after everything, I got an email. No subject line, no text, just an attachment. A single PNG file. I didn't open it. I forwarded it to the police instead. They couldn't trace it. A few months after that, I received a friend request on a blank profile with no name. No posts. Just a single profile picture. It was a wooden carving, a carving of a desk. My desk. I didn't accept it. But the worst moment came last winter. I was living with a roommate by then. I felt safer that way. More eyes. More footsteps in the apartment besides my own. One Thursday evening, a plain white envelope appeared in our mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single page. A screenshot. It was me sitting in my new home office, typing. My hair slightly longer, the room decorated differently. It wasn't from my social media. I hadn't posted online in months. And the angle was from my laptop webcam. A webcam I always kept covered. At the bottom of the page were 3 words, written in thin, neat handwriting. Still watching. Always. The police couldn't trace it. They couldn't prove he was still nearby. But they told me something else, something that made everything worse. Nathan had changed his identity before. He could do it again. And people like him rarely stop. Sometimes late at night, I'll get the distinct feeling that someone is standing just outside my apartment door. Not moving. Not knocking. Just listening. Some mornings, when I check the peephole, I'll swear I see the shadow of a man disappearing around the corner. But I can't prove it. I can't ever get a clear look. And I don't tell my roommate anymore. I don't want to scare him. But the truth is, I know Nathan is still out there. Still collecting. Still cataloging. Still helping. End of quote. And every time I open my laptop, I hesitate for just a moment, wondering if another screenshot is being taken, if another file with my name is being added to some hidden folder. Wondering if he's standing somewhere close, whispering the same thing he said the last time I ever saw him. I wasn't finished with you. Three years ago, my life hit a low point. I don't talk about much. I had dropped out of med school, burned out, broke, and drowning in loan bills that showed up like clockwork. I needed a job where nobody asked questions, nobody expected brilliance, and most importantly, I could work nights so I didn't have to see anyone from my old life. That's how I ended up at the old Apex Logistics warehouse on the far edge of town. If you've ever driven past an abandoned industrial district at night, you know the feeling that place gave me. The warehouse was a massive concrete box, sitting in the middle of a field of cracked pavement, with floodlights that barely pushed back the darkness. It operated at maybe 10% capacity after the company tanked, so most nights it felt like I was patrolling a forgotten tomb rather than a functioning facility. The night crew was tiny. Just me, a forklift driver named Marcus, and our shift supervisor, Silas. Silas was the kind of man who made every instinct in your body tell you something wasn't right. Tall, wiry, sun-damaged skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, and a scar that cut through his eyebrow like something had tried to split his face in two. He claimed he was ex-military, the kind of guy who bragged he'd seen things, but never told you what. On my first night, he introduced me to the rules. We were standing in the security booth lit only by the glow of the monitors. Outside, the building hummed like something asleep and breathing. Rule 1, he said, eyes never leaving mine. Rounds every hour, no exceptions. I nodded. Easy enough. Rule 2, don't enter Sector 4 unless the alarm trips. I asked why. Old inventory, he said. Shelves aren't stable, could fall and kill you, so you stay out. Understand? Yeah, sure. Then he leaned in a bit closer. And Rule 3, if you hear talking, ignore it. The acoustics play tricks. You'll hear things that aren't there. Especially in the vents. He said it so casually it took me a second to process. Talking? In an empty warehouse? But he didn't elaborate. He just walked away, leaving me alone with the hum of the lights and a chill in my stomach. Most nights weren't eventful. Marcus, the forklift driver, spent most of his shift listening to crime podcasts or sleeping in the break room with a jacket over his face. He was the only normal person there, and he warned me early on not to take Silas too seriously. Dude's cracked, he told me, while we shared a greasy 2 a.m. pizza one night. I've seen him have full conversations with empty aisles, stands dead still, staring at nothing, whispering like he's giving orders to ghosts. Well, maybe he's on the phone? I offered. Nope, Marcus said. No phone, and whenever he walks past Sector 4, his whole vibe changes, like he's guarding it. I laughed it off, but not because it was funny, because it bothered me in a way I couldn't explain. The warehouse was already creepy enough. It was a maze of towering shelves, metal ribs that reached 3 stories up into the shadows. 90% of them were empty. Sometimes, when the temperature dropped at night, the steel would shift and let out groans that sounded like something dragging itself across the floor. But after Marcus told me that, I couldn't stop noticing how Silas reacted to Sector 4. Whenever his patrol route brought him near it, he slowed down, then sped up. He never looked directly at it. And sometimes I'd catch him muttering under his breath as he passed it, like he was reassuring something on the other side of the gate. The night everything changed was a Tuesday around 3:30 a.m., peak dead time in a warehouse. I was doing my usual round in Sector 2, tapping my flashlight along shelves out of habit, half asleep on my feet. That's when my radio crackled. At first it was just static. Then, under the static, "Help me." I stopped walking. "Marcus?" I said into the radio. "If you're messing with me, not funny." Static again. Then, clearer this time. "Please, it hurts. He keeps me in the dark." It was a woman's voice. Weak, shaking, terrified. That voice didn't belong in a cold, empty warehouse at 3:30 inches the morning, and every inch of my skin prickled with dread. My first thought was that someone had broken in and gotten hurt. My second thought was that maybe I wasn't alone in the building after all. I pressed the talk button hard enough to hurt my thumb. "Who is this? Where are you? Identify yourself." Silence. Then, Sector 4, under the floor. My blood turned to ice. I radioed Silas immediately. "Boss, I'm picking up unauthorized chatter. A woman. She says she's trapped in Sector 4. There was a long pause. Then Silas responded, sounding eerily calm. "That's interference from truckers on the interstate. Ignore it." "No," I said. "She said under the floor. We have to check it out. If someone's hurt." I said ignore it, Silas snapped. "Return to the booth." He hesitated. And that hesitation was a mistake, because I didn't go back to the booth. Sector 4 was on the far end of the warehouse, where the lights had been turned off months ago to save on electricity. I walked toward it anyway, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air changed the moment I approached it. Colder, heavier, like I was breathing in someone else's exhale. The chain-link gate was padlocked shut, just like Silas had said. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone back there?" Only the hum of ventilation answered me. I lifted my flashlight and shined it between the wires. 50 feet down the aisle, something gleamed faintly on the concrete floor. A metal hatch, a trap door, just barely cracked open. My stomach dropped. Before I could process any of it, something clamped down on my shoulder. I screamed and spun around, dropping my flashlight. The beam bounced wildly across the floor like a strobe. Silas stood behind me. But this wasn't the strict, cold supervisor I knew. His eyes were red. His cheeks were wet. He was crying. Yet his face was completely blank. Silas stood inches away from me, tears streaking down his face, yet showing no emotion at all, like his face had forgotten how to match the rest of him. "I told you not to come here," he whispered, voice trembling in a way that made my stomach twist. "She doesn't like visitors." My throat tightened. I glanced past him toward the faintly open trapdoor. "Silas, who's down there?" He didn't blink, didn't breathe. He just raised the wrench in his right hand, a heavy, rust-stained one that looked like it could shatter bone, and pointed it at the locked gate beside me. "My wife," he said. Every hair on my body stood up. "Your wife?" "She's sick," he whispered, voice cracking like an old floorboard. "She needs the quiet. She needs the dark." I took several slow steps backward, heart punching against my ribs. "Silas, listen. Whoever's in that hole needs help. Real help. Medical help." He wiped his face with his forearm, smearing the tears instead of removing them. "No doctors," he muttered. "Doctors make it worse. She told me. She wants to rest." My pulse spiked. He was delusional, completely gone. I raised my hands. "Okay, Silas, let's talk. Just put the wrench down, we can figure this out." His expression snapped into something cold. "You woke her up." He took a step forward. "You made her hungry." Before I could react, he swung not at me, but at the padlock. The steel shattered with a metallic shriek that echoed through the entire warehouse. He pulled the gate open. "Go," he commanded. "Into the dark. Go apologize." I stared into Sector 4, the unstable shelves, the rotten boxes, the open trapdoor leading straight into God knows what, and I realized something with certainty. If I walked in there, I would never walk out. Silas lifted the wrench again. So I ran. Not into Sector Quattro. Not toward him. I ducked under his arm and sprinted down the main aisle, every instinct in my body screaming. Behind me, Silas roared like an animal and came after me. I bolted past rows of empty shelves, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. The warehouse was so big that your footsteps got swallowed up by the air, so all I heard was my own heartbeat and Silas's boots pounding the floor behind me. "You can't hide," he yelled, voice echoing off the metal rafters. "I know every inch of this place." I skidded around the corner into the loading bay. "Marcus," I screamed, "wake up, help." But the bay was empty. The forklift was parked with the keys still in it. The break room light was off. The silence was heavy and wrong. Then I saw it. A smear of fresh, wet blood streaked across the smooth concrete floor, starting at the forklift, and dragged toward the compactor room. "No," I whispered. "No, no, Marcus." Behind me, Silas stepped into the loading bay, blocking the exit. He wasn't crying anymore. His face had settled into something far scarier. A smile. "Marcus already apologized," he said softly. "She likes him, but she's still hungry." He tapped the wrench against his palm. "And now it's your turn." I didn't think. I just ran. I tore through the aisles of Sector 3, ducking between pallets and using the shelves as cover. Somewhere behind me, Silas dragged the wrench along the concrete floor. A deliberate scraping sound. Taunting. "I can hear you breathing," he whispered. His voice carried eerily well in the hollow space. I killed my flashlight and dove behind a stack of half-collapsed cardboard boxes. My lungs were burning, and I had to clamp both hands over my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. Silas moved slowly, methodically. His boots tapped. The wrench scratched. He was scanning every aisle one by one. "You shouldn't have talked to her," he muttered. "She doesn't forget. She doesn't forgive." I needed a plan. My phone had no signal. There were no windows to break. The building was a metal tomb. Then I remembered the fire alarm by the break room. If I could reach it, the automated system would alert the fire department. But to get there, I had to get past Silas. I grabbed the nearest box filled with cheap plastic phone cases and chucked one down the far aisle. The noise echoed like a gunshot. Silas sprinted toward it immediately, screaming, "I hear you." I bolted out from my hiding spot in the opposite direction, feet barely touching the floor. The glowing exit sign near the break room came into view. 50 feet, 40, 30. Then the overhead lights flickered, buzzed, and blasted on all at once. I froze. Silas stood by the breaker panel on the far wall, hand on the switch. He had anticipated me. His smile vanished. His expression hardened. "End of the exercise," he said, and he charged. I didn't have time to think. I scaled the shelving unit like a ladder, climbing up the beams as fast as my shaking hands would let me. Silas slammed into the rack below, shaking it like he was trying to topple a tree. "Get down here," he roared, smashing the metal beam with his wrench. The whole structure shuddered. Boxes tumbled past me. Dust filled my lungs. I kept climbing until I reached the top 3 stories up. Below, Silas grabbed the rack and started yanking it back and forth. The entire shelf began tipping forward. "Stop, you'll kill us both," I shouted from the top. "Better dead than disobedient," he screamed back. That's when I realized something. The next shelf over was only 4 feet away. A brutal jump, but the only option. I braced my feet, hard in my throat. "Hey, Silas." He looked up. I jumped. My chest slammed into the opposite shelf so hard I saw stars, but I clung on, nails tearing, legs scrambling to pull myself up. Below me, the shelf I had just escaped finally gave way. It toppled forward. Silas tried to run. He didn't make it. The entire metal structure crashed down on him with a deafening roar that shook the floor. Dust burst into the air like an explosion. When the dust settled, I climbed down to check. Silas was pinned under a massive support beam, crushed from the waist down. Still alive, just barely. Blood pooled around him. He looked up at me with fading eyes. "Don't. Go in. The hole," he choked out. "She hates light." And then he went still. The police arrived after I reached the office phone and called 911. They found Marcus's body in the compactor room. He had been beaten to death, but not crushed. But the worst discovery, the one that made seasoned officers walk outside to vomit, was inside Sector 4. They opened the trap door. It wasn't a maintenance hatch. It was an old storm cistern. And inside was a woman. Alive. Barely. Pale. Starved. Half delirious. She had been missing for months, a hitchhiker who disappeared near the interstate. Silas had been keeping her underground. Not as a hostage. As a replacement. In the corner of the cistern was a shrine. Pictures of Silas and his dead wife, same hair, same face shape as the captive. He'd chosen her deliberately. He wasn't guarding Sector 4. He was visiting it. Talking to her. And the voice I heard on the radio? Not a ghost. Not interference. Silas had set up a baby monitor in the cistern so he could listen to her. And sometimes, when the frequency overlapped with our cheap radios, her voice leaked through. Her plea for help was real. She had been crying in the dark for months. I never worked security again. I finished med school, ironically, but I still sleep with a nightlight. Because every once in a while, when the house goes totally silent, I swear I still hear that whisper in the dark. It hurts. He keeps me in the dark. You ever meet someone who's too nice? Not normal nice. I mean the kind where every smile lasts a little too long, every compliment feels rehearsed, and every interaction leaves your gut twisted like it's warning you about something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. That was Dave. Back when this happened, I had just started a telemarketing job in a business park about 40 minutes from my apartment. I was broke, exhausted, and driving a 2004 Civic that sounded like it was held together by prayers and rust. Gas prices were ridiculous, and every day I watched my paycheck evaporate at the pump. That's when Dave approached me. He sat directly across from me in the office. Late 40s, soft-spoken, and so plain-looking he could have walked into a crowded room and disappeared in seconds. He always wore the same beige cardigans, smelled faintly of peppermint, and had this practiced, gentle smile that never reached his eyes. One Friday afternoon, I was venting about gas prices in the break room. Dave stepped up beside me like he'd been waiting for the cue. "I heard you talking earlier," he said. "You live on Elm Street, right? I've seen your car." I remember freezing. I didn't even know he lived near me. Yeah?" I said. "I'm just 2 blocks over," he replied. "I drive a hybrid. Great mileage. If you chip in $20 a week, I'll drive you." It sounded too good to be true, and it was. But at the time, $20 was a miracle. And honestly, Dave seemed harmless. So I agreed. The first week went fine. His car was spotless, unnervingly spotless. Not a speck of dust, not a single smudge on the dashboard. 3 new car scent fresheners dangled from the mirror like he was trying to drown out something else. He talked constantly, mostly about his ex-wife, Linda. She didn't appreciate structure, Dave would say, gripping the wheel at 10 and 2. I need order. A place for everything. Don't you like order, Sam? I'd nod and pretend to scroll on my phone, but something felt off. And by the second week, the weird details weren't so easy to ignore. It started on a Wednesday morning. I walked out of my apartment building at 7:30 a.m., expecting Dave to be waiting in the driver's seat, like always. But he wasn't. He was in the back seat, bent over, doing something I couldn't see. When he noticed me, he jerked upright so fast he hit his head on the roof, then slammed the door shut as if I'd caught him doing something he shouldn't. "Morning," he said too brightly, hurrying into the driver's seat. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said quickly. "Just organizing. Found a stain, had to scrub it out, can't have stains." He said it like stains were a personal insult to him. When we got on the road, I saw something odd on the dashboard. The child lock indicator was on. "Hey," I said, "your child locks are stuck or something." He didn't even glance at the dashboard. "Faulty mechanism," he said flatly. "Doors jam sometimes, safety measure." Then he smiled again. That soft, unsettling little smile he always wore. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. But later that week, things escalated. It was Thursday, winter, dark by 5 p.m., rain pouring so hard the highway shimmered under the headlights. We just left work, and I was ready to go home and collapse into bed. But Dave didn't take the exit toward our neighborhood. He drove past it like he didn't see it. "Dave, you missed the exit," I said. No, he muttered. "Construction, big backup. Google Maps rerouted me." I checked my phone. The route was clear. Not a single red line. "It's clear on mine," I said. "Maybe your maps. Your phone is wrong." The sudden outburst made the hair on my neck rise. Dave cleared his throat a second later, forcing a smile back onto his face, like he was putting on a mask. "Sorry, these apps glitch sometimes." He took us off the main road onto a series of narrow, winding lanes slicing through dense woods. No streetlights, no houses, just the sound of rain hammering the car and trees bending under the wind. My grip tightened on my seatbelt. "This seems out of the way," I said. "It's scenic," he whispered. His voice didn't sound like him. It sounded dead. "Linda hated scenic drives," he added, staring ahead without blinking. "She always wanted to rush home, always leaving me." He turned his head toward me, and for the first time since meeting him, the smile disappeared completely. "Why is everyone always in such a rush to leave me, Sam?" Something in me froze. Every instinct I had suddenly screamed one word: run. But we were still driving deeper into the woods. We pulled onto a gravel shoulder beside a rusted chain-link fence surrounding an abandoned electrical substation. Dave put the car in park. The doors locked with a sharp, deliberate click. My blood turned cold. "Dave, why are we stopping?" He stared straight ahead, breathing fast, fogging up the windshield. "I need you to do something for me," he whispered. I reached for the door handle instinctively. It didn't budge. "Child locks. Open the glove box," he said softly. He hesitated. "Dave, open the glove box." My shaking hands popped it open. Inside wasn't registration, or insurance, or anything normal. There was a snub-nose revolver, a roll of duct tape, a folded piece of cloth. I stared at them, paralyzed. Dave turned toward me, tears running down his cheeks, but he was smiling. Smiling like this was the happiest moment of his life. "I can't do it alone," he said. "It's too heavy. I need help moving it." "Moving what?" I whispered. He pointed toward the trunk. "Linda," he said. "She's been in the trunk all day. She leaked. That's why I was scrubbing the seat." Every breath felt razor sharp. "You said she was your ex-wife," I croaked. "She is," he said brightly. "I divorced her from her life last night." Then he reached for the gun. There's a silence that exists right before violence. Not peaceful silence, the kind where your ears feel hollow, like the world is holding its breath. When Dave's hand closed around the gun, that silence shattered. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. I lunged across the console and grabbed his wrist with both hands. "Sam," he shrieked. "Don't be rude." Ugh. He twisted violently, trying to aim the gun at me. His strength was shocking. I jammed my thumb into his wrist, pressing hard enough to feel tendons shift under the skin. The gun fired. The explosion inside the car was deafening. A flash, a blast, a shower of dust from the roof liner where the bullet tore through. Dave flinched in shock. Just enough. I smashed my fist into his cheekbone. His glasses flew off. He slumped sideways, dazed, the gun slipping out of his hand and falling somewhere near the pedals. I scrambled back to my seat and clawed at the door handle. Still locked. Still child-locked. I slammed my hand onto the driver's side panel, blindly hitting every button. I threw my shoulder into the door, and it flew open. Cold rain slapped my face as I tumbled onto the gravel. Behind me, Dave screamed, "Sam, get back here. We have work to do." But I ran. I ran like every nightmare behind me was real, because this one was. When the door slammed behind me, the cold night air hit like a punch. I scrambled to my feet, slipping on the wet gravel as Dave's voice tore through the rain. "Sam, get back here. We have work to do." I didn't look back, didn't breathe, didn't think. I vaulted over the rusted chain-link fence bordering the abandoned electrical station. The metal tore my jeans and sliced deep into my thigh as I toppled over the other side, landing hard in tall weeds. But adrenaline is anesthesia. Pain didn't exist. Only survival did. I bolted toward the tree line. The woods swallowed me instantly, the darkness suffocating, branches clawing at my face and jacket as I ran blindly into the undergrowth. Behind me, I heard the car door slam open. Then, "Sam," his voice drifting through the rain, almost sing-song. "I know where you live." "Oh." He pushed myself harder. The woods were endless wet leaves, roots, fallen logs hidden beneath the mud. The rain turned the ground into sludge, and every few seconds my foot sank or slid, sending me crashing to my knees. I kept crawling, kept stumbling forward, checking over my shoulder for any sign of light. Then I saw it. A faint flashlight beam slicing through the trees, moving slowly, methodically. Dave wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. He was hunting. "Sam?" he called, closer now. His voice had that eerie calmness again, the voice of someone who genuinely couldn't understand why I wasn't cooperating. "I have the gun. Let's not make this difficult." My breathing was too loud. I pressed a shaking hand over my mouth, forcing myself to breathe through my nose. I crouched low behind a fallen tree, rainwater dripping down my back. His light passed only 30, maybe 40 feet to my left. He wasn't guessing. He was tracking me. "Sam," he repeated, voice cracking with a strange, childlike disappointment. "This is rude. I'm trying to include you." I crawled slowly through the wet leaves, using my hands and knees, staying low. My soaked clothes clung to my skin. Every snapped twig felt like a gunshot under my palm. I moved away from his beam, putting as much distance between us as I could. Minutes or maybe hours passed in that nightmare crawl. Eventually, the trees began thinning. The sound of cars, real cars, faded in beneath the rain. Streetlights. Civilization. I almost sobbed. I slid down a muddy embankment and stumbled onto a 2-lane road, illuminated by an old sodium street lamp. My legs gave out beneath me, but I forced myself upright, waving my arms wildly when I saw headlights coming toward me. A pickup truck swerved hard, brakes screeching, tires spitting water. The window cracked open just an inch. "You all right, buddy?" a deep voice asked cautiously. "You're bleeding." I pointed frantically behind me. "There's a man. He's got a gun, please, please." "Get in the back," the driver barked. "Now." I didn't even hesitate. I threw myself into the truck bed, slamming my palms against the cold metal as the truck lurched forward. As we sped off, I looked back toward the tree line. Dave was standing at the edge of the forest. He wasn't chasing us. He wasn't waving the gun. He was just standing, watching, his figure illuminated for a brief second in the taillights before disappearing into the darkness. At the police station, I was shaking so hard the officers couldn't get a clear statement for several minutes. My ears were still ringing from the gunshot, my clothes soaked. Mud streaked across my arms and face. When I finally got the words out, everything came pouring out. The glove box, the gun, Linda, the trunk. A squad of officers was dispatched immediately. I sat in the station lobby, with a blanket around my shoulders, staring at the floor, unable to stop imagining Dave's polite, creepy smile. The one that stretched too wide, the one that hid everything beneath it. An hour later, the officers returned. They found Dave exactly where we'd left him, still parked on the gravel shoulder beside the electrical substation. He was sitting calmly in the driver's seat with the dome light on, reattaching his glasses, organizing his paperwork like he hadn't chased me into the woods minutes earlier. When the police shouted for him to step out with his hands up, he obeyed immediately. "Yes, sir," he said politely. "Of course, sir." But the moment they popped the trunk, everything changed. Linda's body was wrapped neatly in a shower curtain. Duct tape wrapped around her arms and legs. Decomposition had already begun, and everything Dave said about stains suddenly made horrible, horrifying sense. But that wasn't the worst part. Under a false bottom where the spare tire should have been, the officers found a kit, a shovel, lime, a hacksaw, and a notebook. The notebook was filled with dates, names, people Dave thought had wronged him. Every page was written with perfect penmanship, organized like a ledger. My name was on the very last page. Sam, chews gum too loudly. Unorganized desk. Didn't say bless you on Tuesday. My stomach dropped. Dave hadn't chosen me randomly. He hadn't offered a carpool out of kindness. He picked me because I annoyed him just enough to end up on his list. Helping him bury Linda was never the final step. He fully intended to kill me too. Dave was declared unfit for trial and moved to a maximum security psychiatric facility. According to the officers who escorted him, he apologized the entire ride. Not for Linda, not for the attempted murder, for the rude behavior I showed when I ran from his car. He organizes the prison library now. They say he's polite to everyone. As for me, I don't carpool. I don't take Ubers. I barely drive with friends. I ride a bike. If the weather's bad, I take the bus, and I sit right next to the driver. Because the thing that still keeps me awake at night isn't the chase in the woods. It isn't the gunshot. It isn't even the trunk. It's the knowledge that for 2 entire weeks, I sat 2 feet away from a serial killer in training, and I thought he was just a lonely guy with a peppermint smell and a boring job. Monsters don't always hide under beds. Sometimes they sit beside you. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they offer you a ride to work. And sometimes they're already planning where they want to bury you.